This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
President Biden delivers his final remarks to the United Nations General Assembly. I'm John Stolnis in Washington.
Helene churning toward Florida.
10 to 15 feet of storm surge.
I'm Clayton Neville.
Marcellus Williams executed in Missouri after the U.S. Supreme Court denies his last appeal. I'm Jeff McKay in Washington.
The U.S. will send Ukraine another $375 million in military aid. Sagar Meghani at the White House.
Stocks are coming off another winning day, and the S&P 500 index opens at yet another record high this morning. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
A Haitian group in Springfield, Ohio, has filed citizen criminal charges against former President Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I'm Haya Panjwani.
All ahead on America in the Morning. In what was his final speech before the United Nations General Assembly, President Biden bid farewell to the international body and pressed once again for a peace deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. John Stolnis has the story from Washington.
The president putting the war in Gaza at the center of his remarks yesterday, urging those assembled to remember the horrors visited upon Israel nearly a year ago by Hamas terrorists.
The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again.
And President Biden repeated his calls for a peace deal between Israel and Hamas.
Bring the hostages home and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip. Ease the suffering in Gaza and end this war.
However, Jordanian King Abdullah II bin al-Hussein criticized the way Israel has handled the war and lamented the plight of the Palestinians caught in the crossfire.
The attacks of October 7th on Israeli civilians last year were condemned by countries all over the world, including Jordan. But the unprecedented scale of terror unleashed on Gaza since that day is beyond any justification.
Iran's newly elected president, Masoud Pezeshkian, declared a desire for peace and to, quote, seek no quarrel with anyone, saying, naturally, blind Israeli state terrorism over the past few days in Lebanon, followed by a massive aggression with thousands of victims, cannot go unanswered. Iran, referring to coordinated strikes by Israel against Hezbollah forces in Lebanon, using pagers and missile strikes aimed at eliminating the terror group's ability to attack Israel. Hezbollah is backed by Iran. The IDF says multiple senior Hezbollah leaders have been killed in recent days. Speaking to reporters, Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, says they will continue to degrade Hezbollah's capabilities.
We will not let Iran's terrorist cronies dictate the future of our nation. Israeli forces have taken necessary actions to protect our nation.
President Biden also urged nations not to let up on support for Ukraine and said it is the responsibility of all nations to work together for peace. John Stolnis, Washington.
Much of Florida and other parts of the Southeast are bracing for another potential hurricane as Helene churns through the Caribbean Sea. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports mandatory evacuations are now underway in parts of 7 Florida counties.
If Helene makes landfall as a hurricane, it would be the 4th in the mainland United States this year. So far, we've seen Beryl, Debbie, and Francine. Helene's packing quite the punch, according to National Hurricane Center Deputy Director Jamie Rome.
We've been talking for the last 24 hours about how big this storm would be. Now you can visually see it in the watches and warnings. Look how far outside of the cone the watches and warning extend. I mean, they're practically covering a good chunk of the Florida peninsula and then extending well into southern Georgia.
The region preparing for impacts of storm surge, heavy rain, and high wind.
Florida's going to get hit hard. Our friends to the west in Alabama are going to receive a lot of damage. And this thing's going to continue north into Tennessee.
Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Director Chris Stallings encouraging residents to prepare for the worst.
Winds that are going to drop power lines, trees. So making sure that your emergency kit allows you to be safe for up to 72 hours is extremely important.
The Big Bend area of Florida bracing for winds as high as 115 miles per hour.
Notably here, Orlando and Tampa, you're under a tropical storm warning. Tampa, you're also under a hurricane watch. Tallahassee, you're under a hurricane warning.
Wind and rain a concern for Deputy Director Rome, but so is the potential storm surge.
Up here in the Big Bend area in the Nature Coast, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge is possible with this particular system. Again, I stand 6 feet tall, so more than double my height of water rise. Even working your way down Tampa Bay, potential exists for you to get 5 to 8 feet of storm surge.
Because of the size and scope of the storm, torrential rain is expected to be seen hundreds of miles inland. Georgia and Florida expected to get the brunt of the impact. I'm Clayton Neville.
U.S. okays more aid for Ukraine when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning on this, the last Wednesday of September, with the nation's forecast. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Helene will be moving into the eastern Gulf of Mexico today, and as it does, it will continue to gather strength over the historically warm waters in the region. This intensification will continue through the day Wednesday and into Thursday. Helene is expected to become a Category 3 hurricane Thursday, which is considered a major hurricane. Some of the outer bands of rain from Helene will move into southwest Florida as early as this afternoon and then continue to build through the rest of the state Wednesday night. Landfall is expected Thursday evening in the Florida Panhandle with a significant storm surge up to 15 feet and rainfall over 8 inches and gusts up to 160 miles per hour. Flooding rain will also be expansive farther inland as well. Meanwhile, the rest of the eastern U.S. will have an elongated frontal system today that will produce widespread showers and thunderstorms from eastern Texas into Georgia and then northward through the Ohio Valley and Middle Atlantic, eastern Great Lakes and Northeast. Some of the rain in Alabama and Georgia could be heavy for a time today. Heading out to the northwest, we have another storm entering the U.S. with rain along and ahead of it through the Washington and Oregon coastal areas into the Cascades, especially during the afternoon hours. This system will continue to produce showers inland into Idaho and western Montana tonight. The rest of the nation is going to be largely dry with a decent amount of sunshine. After some comfortable days, the heat will be building back into the Plains states with highs in the 90s, even upper 90s in parts of eastern Montana, Wyoming, and the western Dakotas. That's the weather across America. It is going to be a hot day in Salt Lake City, Utah, with plenty of sunshine and a high of 91. In Albany, New York, there will be plenty of clouds and some showers with a high of 65. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. After the U.S. Supreme Court gave the go-ahead, the state of Missouri executed Marcellus Williams. Here's America in the Morning's Jeff McKay with more on the story.
The High Court's decision came about 24 hours after the Missouri Supreme Court and Republican Governor Mike Parson declined to intervene on Marcellus Williams' behalf. Williams was convicted of first-degree murder in 2001 for the 1998 stabbing death of Felicia Gale in St. Louis. Questions had been raised if Williams was indeed guilty of the crime. St. Louis County prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell had sought to set aside Williams' sentence, citing questions about his guilt. The Missouri Supreme Court in its ruling this week said DNA evidence failed to establish Williams' innocence. Without DNA evidence pointing to any alternative suspect, the Midwest Innocence Project attorneys reached a compromise with the prosecutor's office. Williams would enter a new no-contest plea to first-degree murder in exchange for a new sentence of life in prison without parole. Although the judge and the victim's family signed off on the deal, the state Supreme Court blocked the agreement. The 55-year-old Williams was put to death around 6 p.m. Central Time at the Missouri State Prison. I'm Jeff McKay in Washington.
The U.S. will send another military aid package to Ukraine totaling $375 million, as the Ukrainian president will be heading to Washington to meet with President Biden. Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani has details.
Officials say the package includes medium-range cluster bombs, rockets, artillery. They will come from Pentagon stocks, which will let them get to Ukraine faster. The package is one of the biggest approved recently and comes as President Biden told the UN General Assembly global support for Kyiv in the fight against Russia must continue.
We cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed?
Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky.
Putin has broken so many international norms and rules that he won't stop on his own. Russia can only be forced into peace.
Sagar Meghani at the White House.
Senators grill the CEO of a weight loss drug on Capitol Hill when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Welcome back. Here with America in the Morning. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, always putting clients' interests first. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning after modest gains for stocks yesterday, and the S&P 500 index is at yet another record high. Now, a lot of people have an S&P 500 index fund in a retirement account. If you do, you're up more than 20% year to date. Visa facing an antitrust lawsuit from the Department of Justice over what it calls an illegal monopoly in the debit card business.
The complaint alleges that Visa maintains its monopoly position by blocking the growth of existing competitors and preventing other firms from innovating new solutions. The government says here that more than 60% of debit transactions in the U.S. run on Visa's network, which allows the company to charge more than $7 billion in processing fees every year. And the government says that Visa's agreements with merchants and banks punish its customers who route transactions to other networks or systems.
CNBC's Eamon Javers. Visa calls the suit meritless and says it's proud of the service it provides. Southwest Airlines not getting profitable enough, fast enough. An activist investor group, Elliott, is pushing for a shareholder meeting. Elliott's been forcing some big changes, like getting rid of open seating and charging more for the better seats on the plane, like other airlines.
Elliott, they're not happy with where Southwest is, with the current leadership. And we know that there's an investor day on Thursday where Southwest will provide greater detail for how it plans to turn around the airline. I don't think that matters to Elliott. Elliott's belief is there's nothing you can tell us right now that convinces us that this is the right path for the airline.
CNBC's Phil LeBeau. Mars Wrigley has peanut butter and jelly flavored M&Ms. They'll be out in December.
What happened to the weight loss drug CEO in Washington?
Yes, Novo Nordisk's CEO was at a Senate hearing over why their weight loss drugs, Ozempic and Wegovy, cost so much more for Americans than for patients in other countries. And he partially blamed pharmacy benefit managers as middlemen, many of which are owned by insurance companies.
While the current system makes huge profits for large drug companies like Novo Nordisk, huge profits for insurance companies, and huge profits for PBMs. The outrageously high cost of Ozempic, Wegovy, and other prescription drugs is directly related to the broken, dysfunctional, and cruel healthcare system in our country.
That's Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Ozempic can be as much as $1,400 a month here in the U.S. and just $92 a month in the U.K. On today's watch list, earnings from Micron, new home sales numbers for August, and we find out how many people applied for mortgages last week.
CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. When we return on America in the Morning, Haitian group sues Trump and Vance after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Welcome back. A Haitian group in Springfield, Ohio, is now seeking criminal charges against former President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance. Correspondent Panjwani reports.
A Haitian group in Springfield, Ohio, has filed citizen criminal charges against former President Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. The leader of a national nonprofit representing Haitians has filed criminal charges against Trump and Vance over chaos and threats experienced in Springfield, Ohio, after they spread false claims about legal immigrants. Their lawyer says the Haitian Bridge Alliance filed the charges under a private citizen statute because local prosecutors haven't acted. The group seeks arrest warrants against Trump and Vance. More than 30 bomb threats were directed at state and local government buildings and schools, prompting closures, the assignment of additional law enforcement protection, and security cameras. Some of the city's Haitian residents have also said they feared for their safety. I'm Panjwani.
The first Kmart store opened 62 years ago in Michigan. Now, as correspondent Julie Walker reports, one of the last will be fading its famous blue light to black with the shuttering of its last full-scale U.S. store.
Attention, remaining Kmart shoppers. The end is near for its Hampton store, the last full-scale Kmart in the mainland U.S. The store in Bridgehampton, New York, says it's closing October 20th. That will leave only a small Kmart in Miami and a handful of stores in Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In its heyday, there were more than 2,000 Kmarts in the U.S. In early 2002, Kmart filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. A few years later, a hedge fund combined Sears and Kmart, pledging to return them to their former greatness. But the 2008 recession and Amazon contributed in derailing that mission. Julie Walker, New York.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour.
Ryan Wesley Routh has been indicted on charges of attempting to assassinate a major presidential candidate, Ben Thomas Washington.
Comments by Vice President Harris over the 60-vote filibuster seemingly lose her an endorsement. I'm Clayton Neville.
Questions about your rights during a traffic stop, and the star witness in the FTX fraud trial learns her fate.
A congressman from Long Island not only put a family member on his payroll, but also his lover. I'm Sue Aller.
If you have an Android, Google Play Store may have installed malware. I'm Chuck Palm.
Another person has come forward to accuse Sean Combs of sexual assault. I'm Kevin Carr.
Back after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Approaching storm prompts evacuations. Part of what's happening in today's national forecast. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Helene will be moving into the eastern Gulf of Mexico today, and as it does, it will gather strength over the incredibly warm waters of the region. This strengthening will continue through the day today into Thursday. Helene is expected to become a Category 3 hurricane Thursday, which is considered a major hurricane. Some of the outer bands of rain from Helene will move into southwest Florida as early as this afternoon, and then that will continue to build through the rest of the state Wednesday night. Landfall is expected Thursday evening in the Florida Panhandle with a significant storm surge up to 15 feet and rainfall over 8 inches with some gusts up to 160 miles per hour. Flooding rain, and it will be expansive farther inland as well. Meanwhile, the rest of the eastern U.S. will have an elongated frontal system today that will produce widespread showers and thunderstorms from eastern Texas into Georgia and then northward through the Ohio Valley into the middle Atlantic, eastern Great Lakes, and northeast. Some of the rain in Alabama and Georgia could be heavy for a time. We have another storm system entering the U.S. in the northwest with rain along and ahead of it through the coasts of Washington and Oregon into the Cascades, especially during the afternoon hours. This system will continue to produce showers inland into Idaho and western Montana tonight. The rest of the nation is going to be largely dry with an abundance of sunshine. After some comfortable days, heat will be building back into the Plains states with highs in the 90s, even upper 90s in parts of eastern Montana, Wyoming, and the western Dakotas, though it will still be more comfortable over much of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan into Iowa and Illinois, with highs generally in the 70s. But it will also be more comfortable in the California valleys today with temperatures dropping 5 to 10 degrees, but it will remain hot in the desert southwest. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Don't forget you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. Federal prosecutors have filed charges against the man arrested for plotting to assassinate former President Trump at a Florida golf course. Ben Thomas reports the judge assigned to the proceedings also presided over Trump's classified documents case.
Ryan Wesley Routh has been indicted on charges of attempting to assassinate a major presidential candidate. Routh was arrested after allegedly staking out Donald Trump at his Florida golf course armed with a rifle. He'd initially been charged with 2 federal firearms offenses. The upgraded charges come in a 5-count indictment that reflects the Justice Department's assessment that he methodically plotted to kill the Republican nominee, aiming a rifle through the shrubbery surrounding Trump's West Palm Beach golf course on an afternoon Trump was playing on it. Prosecutors say he also left a handwritten note describing his intention and offering $150,000 for anyone who could finish the job if he failed. The other new charges include assaulting a federal officer and possessing a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. Ben Thomas, Washington.
The son of Ryan Routh, accused in the second Trump assassination plot, was arrested. Authorities claim they found hundreds of images of child pornography on Orrin Routh's computer in his North Carolina home. As Israel and Hezbollah battled in the Middle East, a number of nations, including Turkey and Jordan, focused their speeches at the UN General Assembly in New York on Israel, despite its being attacked on 2 fronts by terrorist groups. Correspondent Julie Walker reports.
What we've seen over the last week has been dramatic. The consequences on civilians has been huge. What we've been discussing today is how do we respond to this? How do we help those people that are in need, those people that are trying to move from one place to another?
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan used his lengthy United Nations General Assembly speech to cite Gaza as an example of the failures of the UN and accuse the Israeli government of ethnic cleansing.
In Gaza, not only children are dying, but also the United Nations system. The values that the West claims to defend are dying.
Jordan's King Abdullah II's speech also centered on Israeli action, saying the country's campaigns undermine some human rights.
Our United Nations is facing a crisis that strikes at its very legitimacy.
As for the idea of Palestinians finding new homes in Jordan, he says forced displacement is a war crime and that will never happen. Julie Walker, New York.
Vice President Kamala Harris isn't likely to gain the endorsement of outgoing Senator Joe Manchin after comments she made in support of changing Senate rules to pass abortion protection laws. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports.
It's apparently a deal breaker for Senator Joe Manchin, a longtime Democrat and a recently declared independent.
I'm not endorsing.
He told reporters he's not endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris in her bid for the presidency after she said that she backs the idea of doing away with the 60-vote filibuster in order to restore abortion protections under Roe v. Wade, which was overturned in 2022, returning decisions on abortion to states.
I've been very clear in my whole career is that the 60-vote threshold that we basically operate under in the Senate is essential for us to maintain the type of the type of longevity we need in our bills, the type of security in our bills, and basically how we do business.
The vice president's comments came during an interview on Wisconsin Public Radio.
While the presidential election is extremely important and dispositive of where we go moving forward, it also is about what we need to do to hold on to the Senate and win seats in the House.
And she outright said,
I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe. And we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
Manchin, who's retiring, told CNN that Harris knows the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy. He said, quote, shame on her. Republican presidential nominee, former President Trump, took to social media on the topic. He said congratulations to Senator Manchin for not endorsing radical Kamala Harris because of her, quote, death wish for the filibuster and the rule of law. I'm Clayton Neville.
When news broke about the recent traffic stop and detainment of Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill, questions have been raised as to a driver's constitutional rights if they're pulled over by police. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports.
American drivers might universally wince or brace themselves at the sight and sound of flashing red and blue lights and blaring sirens. But all drivers have constitutional rights when pulled over on the road. Studies show black motorists are more likely to face the threat or use of force by police in traffic stops, like Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill did. And many black families give a version of the talk to loved ones about how to interact with police officers. Paul Butler is a Georgetown University law professor.
The immediate short-term goal is to get out of the encounter without being arrested or beat up or killed.
During a traffic stop, drivers have constitutional rights against incriminating themselves or permitting the search of their car. The right to remain silent is the most widely known right. Drivers also have the Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizure and have the right to ask traffic officers questions. Here's Jen Rolnick-Borchetta with the American Civil Liberties Union.
If they ask to search you or your car, you can say no. And if you're not sure whether they're asking or telling, you can ask them that question and they have to tell you honestly.
Passengers can also ask if they can leave the scene of the traffic stop. The officer does have the right to ask drivers and passengers to get out of their car and can use reasonable force to make sure that happens. Officers can also pull drivers over even if they haven't committed an infraction, as long as there's reasonable suspicion to think that the person has. Haya Panjwani, Washington.
Among the stories we're covering next, congressman's alleged improprieties and alert for Android users. Those stories and more when America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Carolyn Ellison, the star witness in the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison over her role in the FTX fraud. Correspondent Norman Hall reports.
Caroline Ellison, a former top executive in Sam Bankman-Fried's fallen FTX cryptocurrency empire, has been sentenced by a federal judge in New York to 2 years in prison. Ellison apologized repeatedly to everyone hurt by a fraud that stole billions of dollars from investors, lenders, and customers. Judge Lewis A. Kaplan said Ellison's cooperation was remarkable, but that he could not let cooperation be a get-out-of-jail-free card. Ellison pleaded guilty nearly 2 years ago and testified against Bankman-Fried at a trial last November. She was ordered to report to prison November 7th. I'm Norman Hall.
The state of Maryland has added to the legal troubles facing the owner and operator of the container ship Dolly, which caused the deadly collapse of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. The state announced a new lawsuit that mirrors several other recent filings, alleging the ship's Singapore-based owner and manager knowingly sent an unseaworthy ship into U.S. waters. Last week, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the ship owners, detailing the cascading series of failures that left the Dolly's pilots and crew helpless to stop the out-of-control cargo ship from hitting the bridge last March. The state's claim seeks punitive damages against the company, as well as costs associated with cleaning up the wreckage, rebuilding the bridge, lost tolls, and port revenue. America in the Morning continues. An Empire State congressman is pushing back on a New York Times story that he violated house rules by employing both his fiance's daughter and a woman he was allegedly having an affair with. Sue Aller has the story.
In a highly competitive race come this November, which could determine which party controls Congress, a Republican from Long Island has found himself under fire after a New York Times article suggests candidate Anthony D'Esposito may have broken congressional House ethic rules. According to the Times article, D'Esposito reportedly hired both his fiance's daughter and lover to work in his office. Congressman D'Esposito denied all of it as reporters from CNN spoke to him as he headed to his car after leaving the Capitol.
Is it true that you hired your fiance's daughter and
your lover, is that true?
Absolutely not.
James Sample, a constitutional law professor at Hofstra University, spoke to Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
In the wake of the Me Too movement, the House adopted a new provision which says that House members are categorically prohibited from having a sexual relationship with anyone who is employed by the member.
This is reaction from voters who spoke to Fox 5 New York.
That doesn't make him a bad congressman necessarily.
It's improper to do.
Come back when it's more than just allegedly.
Should know better.
D'Esposito is facing Democrat Laura Gillen for New York's 4th District this November. I'm Sue Aller.
A bankruptcy judge is set to rule that conspiracy theorist Alex Jones' InfoWars media platform and its assets will be sold off piece by piece in auctions this fall to help pay the more than $1 billion he owes relatives of victims of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Despite the pending loss of his company, Jones vows to continue his talk shows through other means, possibly including a new website and his personal social media accounts. Jones and his company both filed for bankruptcy protection in 2022, the same year Sandy Hook families won a nearly $1.5 billion defamation case. If you're an Android user, you get your apps and updates from the Google Play Store, but in some cases, malware may have piggybacked its way onto your device. That in tech news today. Here's our Chuck Palm.
A new malware variant may well have infected your Android phone. The Necro-Trojan variant was installed through malicious advertising software and development kits that are used by legitimate apps on the Google Play Store. Android games and updates downloaded from the Play Store to install the Trojan virus and could have come from Spotify, WhatsApp, and Minecraft. Google had been advised by Kaspersky and identified several apps, and Google states they have removed these versions, but older versions still could exist on your Android device. Some upgrades to applications and games showed suspicious behavior, displaying advertisements and installing software using invisible web views to interact with other paid services. Android does not report the number of installations. However, Google Play has had at least 11 million installations of the malware. Invest in good anti-malware software and never install patches or upgrades or new applications from unknown sources. Follow me on X at Chuck Palm.
America in the Morning's Robert Workman has a check of Wednesday sports.
Baseball, 8 playoff spots are secured as of this morning. 4 more coming in the next 5 days. The Astros came from behind to edge the Mariners 4-3 and wrap up the AL West crown for the 4th year in a row. All of their runs came via the long ball. Jason Hayward's 2-run shot in the 5th was the difference maker. The Orioles spanked the Yankees 5-3, 3 dingers, including number 44 for Anthony Santander, getting them into October.
It means a lot. That means we are in October. It's small baseball. Anything can happen. We got a special group right here.
It also prevented New York from wrapping up the division title. Padres down the Dodgers 4-2, choking off LA's 9th inning rally with a game-ending triple play. That puts San Diego into the postseason. Phillies fell to the Cubs, so Philadelphia remains a half game behind the Dodgers for the top spot in the NL. Braves beat the Mets. Diamondbacks got hammered by the Giants, so New York is a half game ahead of Arizona for the second wild card, with Atlanta just another half game back. Royals nipped the Nationals in 10 innings to snap a 7-game losing streak. The Tigers shaded the Rays. Tarek Skubal wins his 18th. KC and Detroit are tied for the second AL wild card, with the Royals owning the tiebreaker. Twins lost to the Marlins. Red Sox over the Blue Jays. Minnesota and Boston still on the hunt. Guardians ripped the Reds. Cleveland assures itself of a first-round bye and trails the Yankees by a game and a half for the AL top seed. A's got a walk-off win over the Rangers to start their final series in Oakland. White Sox scored 3 in the 8th to wing the Angels and stay at 120 losses. That's Wednesday Sports.
Your midweek sports update. When we return on America in the Morning, the man in black honored after these messages. We're back. This is America in the Morning. Sean Diddy Combs, already in jail facing sex trafficking charges, is now being sued for sexual assault. Kevin Carr has the story.
A week after he was arrested for sex trafficking and other charges, Sean Combs has been hit with a lawsuit alleging sexual violence. On Tuesday in New York federal court, attorney Gloria Allred filed a 26-page civil suit against Combs and his bodyguard Joseph Sherman for drugging and sexually assaulting her client, Dahlia Graves.
Defendant Combs and another defendant committed a, quote, violation of New York City Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act.
The graphic complaint describes violent sexual assault in the summer of 2001. Graves claims that last year she discovered the assault had allegedly been videotaped and distributed as a form of humiliation and intimidation. Graves says the incident left her physically and emotionally scarred.
The internal pain after being sexually assaulted has been incredibly deep and hard to put into words. It goes beyond just physical harm caused by and during the assault.
This is the 11th person to accuse Combs of sexual assault, but she is the first one to do so since his arrest last week. Graves commented on his incarceration, but said it's not enough.
I'm glad that he is locked up, but that's a temporary feeling of relief.
Graves is seeking unspecified damages to be determined at a later date. I'm Kevin Carr.
A new statue was unveiled honoring the late singer and musician Johnny Cash in a place you'd likely not expect. Entertainment correspondent Margie Zaraletta reports.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine.
That's the U.S. Air Force Band performing Johnny Cash's song, I Walk the Line. An 8-foot bronze statue of Cash now stands in the U.S. Capitol. It shows Cash with his head bowed, holding a Bible, and with a guitar slung on his back.
Words cannot come close to expressing our pride to see my dad accorded such a singular privilege, the first musician in history to be included in the Statuary Hall collection.
Cash is the first musician to be represented in the hall.
There were two things in which he was unbending and inflexible. One was his commitment to nonviolence in word and deed, both societal and personal. And the other was the daily choice he made. When in doubt, choose love.
Cash's daughter, musician Roseanne Cash, says she wishes she could tell the 8-year-old Cash who worked in the cotton fields about this day.
He might say that he fulfilled the ultimate American dream and even achieved a sort of immortality.
I'm Archie Zaraletta.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.